This one didn't happen to me, but to my cousin. He and his girlfriend at the time decided to take a road trip across the country, staying at Airbnbs instead of hotels to save money. One of their stops was in a small town neither of them had ever heard of. The pictures of the Airbnb looked great. An old but beautiful house with vintage furniture, a big kitchen, and even a clawfoot bathtub. They arrived late at night around 11 p.m. and let themselves in with the code the owner had sent them. The house was just as nice as the pictures, but there was something off. My cousin said he felt like the air was heavy, like something was pressing down on his chest the moment he stepped inside. His girlfriend, on the other hand, didn't seem to notice anything. She was excited about how cute the place was, gushing over the antique furniture and how cozy everything felt. Trying to shake off the weird feeling, my cousin brought their bags upstairs to the bedroom, while his girlfriend made them some tea. As he was walking down the hallway, he noticed a small door at the end, one that wasn't in any of the pictures from the listing. Curious, he tried the handle. It was locked. Figuring it was just a closet or storage space, he didn't think much of it and went back downstairs. They spent the next couple of hours relaxing, watching TV and unwinding from the long drive. Eventually, they decided to head to bed. Sometime in the middle of the night, my cousin woke up suddenly. He wasn't sure why at first. There was no noise, no movement, nothing obvious that would have startled him awake. But then, he noticed something strange. The air felt even heavier than before, like something was in the room with them. Lying still, he listened carefully, his eyes adjusting to the darkness. That's when he heard it. A soft, creaking sound, coming from above them, from the attic. His heart started racing. He nudged his girlfriend awake and whispered, "Do you hear that?" She groggily listened for a second before shaking her head. "Hear what?" Right then, another creak. Louder this time. Like footsteps. Now, fully awake, she heard it too. They both stared up at the ceiling, their breathing shallow. Then, something even worse happened. A soft tap, tap, tap started coming from the small door at the end of the hallway, like someone, or something, was on the other side. That was enough for them. They grabbed their things in record time, bolted out of the house, and drove to the nearest hotel, not even bothering to lock the door behind them. The next morning, my cousin sent a message to the Airbnb host, asking if there was anyone else who had access to the house. The host responded almost immediately, swearing that nobody else should have been there. That's when my cousin mentioned the attic noises and the tapping on the door. The host didn't respond for over an hour. When they finally did, all they said was, "I'm sorry. I should have warned you about the attic." No explanation, no follow-up, just that. My cousin didn't press for details. He just left a vague but negative review and moved on. But to this day, he swears he saw that attic door handle rattle right before they left. And that's why he refuses to stay at an Airbnb ever again. I owned an Airbnb house for several years. I stopped due to the stress of keeping up with it, as well as maintaining my actual job. The benefits of using Airbnb instead of renting the place out like you normally would is that you have the chance to make a lot more money, if your house gets booked a lot. Being in a relatively high-traffic area for vacations, Airbnb was a great option for us. My wife and I were excited in the beginning, but it got more demanding as more people booked the house. We needed to keep everything on schedule, hire cleaning services after the first customers left and before the next ones arrived, and be sure to respond to their messages and emails in a timely manner. Things were going well for a couple of years before we had what we thought was a young couple staying at the house. Just like every other time, when they arrived, I texted them the unlock code for the door. I almost never actually saw the customers. After they let me know they were inside and everything was good, I sat back and relaxed for the rest of my day off. I should also mention that I almost never even talked to the customers, more than just a couple of texts. Usually, they text me when they get there and when they leave, and sometimes an occasional question about the house, but that's usually it. But as 9 o'clock came around and I was just about to get ready for bed, I got a text from the young man staying at the house. It was short, saying he was going to call me in a minute. And then, a minute later, he called. I already had a bad feeling when I saw the text, but what he said still surprised me. He said that the water wasn't working in the house. Of course, I apologized, though I didn't understand how that could be possible. But living in a house without water is unacceptable, so I knew I had to get it fixed immediately. I asked if I could come check it out really quick so that I could have someone come in the morning to fix it. He agreed, being very polite about the whole thing, and I drove over there. A few minutes later, pulling into the driveway, I noticed 2 cars. At the time, this wasn't necessarily a red flag, but more just an odd thing I noticed, because they were apparently a young couple on vacation for a single night. So, I didn't understand why they would rent 2 separate cars. I thought someone must be visiting them, which actually isn't allowed, but I didn't mind so much. I walked up to the front door and knocked before entering the code and walking inside. It was very quiet. I expected them to be waiting for me, but they weren't anywhere that I could see. I probably should have looked around for them first, but I was tired and just wanted to get this over with. The first thing I wanted to check was the main water valve to make sure there wasn't a leak or a flood. So, I went down to the basement and over to the valve. Everything seemed normal. No water anywhere or signs of damage. I was confused, but then I fiddled with the valve and immediately heard water start rushing again. I turned it more, realizing it had been completely shut off manually. I stayed in the basement for another minute, trying to understand why this was done before I started to get a really uncomfortable feeling, especially since I didn't even see the people when I walked inside. I just couldn't see how it could have been anyone other than them who turned off the water, which meant they were trying to get me to come over on purpose, or maybe give them a discount on their stay for the inconvenience. I decided I was going to leave, get to my car, then try calling them back, just to be safe. I got up and started walking towards the stairs until I heard the basement door open, followed by multiple sets of footsteps walking down. When they got to the bottom, 3 men stood there. "Is it fixed?" one of them said, sounding like the same man I talked to on the phone, though all of these men were much older than the young man I thought was staying at the house. I told him it should be working now, and that the valve must have just tightened on its own. I was trying not to point any blame since the whole thing was making me so uncomfortable. I just wanted to get out of that basement and away from these guys. They all just kind of stood there, looking at me, not saying anything after that. "Well, let me know if you need anything else," I said, walking between them, trying to get to the stairs. They still just stood there, watching me walk around them. But as I went past the 3rd guy, closest to the stairs, I spotted a gun shoved in the back of his pants. It made me freak out a little, and I rushed a bit quicker up the stairs. But they didn't follow. They stayed in the basement as I quickly walked out the door and drove away. When I got home, I woke up my wife and told her what had happened. He convinced me to call the police to check up on them. They weren't the people we thought were staying there, and the situation was strange, so it felt justified. I think we waited 20 minutes before a call came from an officer claiming nobody seemed to be home and that he might need me to open the door. I gave him the code instead, and he called back another 20 minutes later, saying that there were no signs of anyone still being there. The next day, we found out the card the man paid with was stolen, and after looking around the house, they had stolen some expensive decorations and appliances as well. I guess there never actually was a young couple. The one thing that was left unexplained was their whole plan with the water not working. I think they either wanted me to not charge them for their stay so that they could use the stolen card for longer, or they were planning on robbing me at gunpoint. But then, that makes me question why they didn't. 3 dangerous, unidentified men blocking my exit in the basement after leading me into a trap, and they just let me go. It doesn't make sense to me. But after that, I never went to the house while customers were home, and a few months later we stopped using Airbnb and just put the house up for rent. I was taking a solo trip to Salt Lake City last year. I'd never actually had the chance to go on many vacations before, and when I did, it was always with my family. This was the first time I was finally going to get to enjoy my time somewhere else, all by myself. I know it sounds a bit weird, but being alone is fine with me, especially since I never get to be alone anyway. I looked up both hotels and Airbnbs in the area, and surprisingly, the Airbnbs were a lot nicer and less pricey. However, all the cheaper ones were a bit further away from the city. I was driving my own car though, so I didn't care too much about having to travel a bit and went with a nicely sized Airbnb. It was small, but the kitchen and bedroom were nice, which was all I really cared about. I got there at 6 on Sunday morning. The owner texted me the password, and I brought all of my stuff inside. It was really nice, much better than the small apartment I shared with my roommate. Once I got everything inside and set up, I hopped on the couch and turned on the TV. It was a 10-hour drive, so I was looking forward to chilling for the night and enjoying the silence. I fell asleep pretty quickly, but it was only around 7 o'clock, so my body woke me up a few hours later. The time was just past 10, and the TV was still on. I grabbed the remote and turned it off, then got up to get a glass of water before going to the bedroom. As I walked from the living room to the kitchen, I felt a strong, cold breeze brush against me. With my tired eyes, I looked to my right and saw the front door was fully open. My eyes shot open and my heart pounded. I stared at the door for a moment, then looked around the room. I knew I had closed and locked it, so this was really freaking me out. I walked over to the door and closed it softly, listening intently for any sounds of someone being inside. For reference, I'm not the biggest guy in the world, but I am fairly tall and in shape. So unless an intruder had a gun, I felt confident I could force them away. I grabbed a kitchen knife, still being quiet, and walked room to room, checking every inch of the house. Nobody was there. This only confused me more. I sent a text to the homeowner, asking if someone was supposed to come over tonight or something, explaining what had happened. It was late, though, so I didn't expect a response right away. I went around to every door, locking each one, then quickly checked the house again. While more awake than before, I was still really tired. I went to bed and fell asleep with no trouble. When I woke up, though, I was much less calm than I had been before. I heard something. From outside. Not outside the house. Outside my bedroom door. I didn't know what to do and kind of just froze, waiting for whoever was outside the room to do something first. As I sat there in bed, I thought about how the person could have possibly gotten in. The only person who would have the password to the door was the homeowner, so honestly, in that moment, I was sure it was him. This gave me more courage, thinking it must be some creepy guy who likes to spy on the people who stay at his Airbnb. I got out of bed, still not having heard anything else, and grabbed my phone from the nightstand to call the cops. I must have made too much noise, though, because almost right away, someone started running away from the door and toward the front of the house. That only frightened me more, knowing the intruder was standing right next to the bedroom door the entire time. I dialed 911. During the time it took for the cops to arrive, nothing else happened. The person had left. I found a hotel to stay at for the rest of the vacation. But what's crazy is that the owner of the Airbnb gave me a refund, as he was able to prove it wasn't him. He was very concerned about it, and he was actually a really nice old man. It was already creepy enough when I thought it was the owner, but knowing that it was just some random guy makes it even worse. I don't know how he was able to get in or why he was stalking me, but it still gives me chills thinking about it. The part I think about the most is waking up and seeing the front door open. Now that I know someone was actually in the house, that means that whoever it was came in, saw me asleep on the couch, then proceeded to do whatever it was they came there to do, and it's just really unnerving and creepy. It makes me never want to stay at an Airbnb alone again.